I want to thank you though, John, because this is like I think the first year I've seen four of the Oscar nominees.
Also, the
Th-
language thing must have been like candy for you. It's like
Oh, it was. Except
uh,
I kept waiting for the German woman to speak German,
no,
but
she never
she
did.
She
really
never
she hated
does.
Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
It
This
man,
only
is
comes out towards the end
everything
of the
that film
movie.
with the last film we saw lacked. This did not lack.
this is my fourth favorite movie of last year now.
Yeah,
Like
this
this
is
is
my,
this
It's
movie
excellent.
this movie fucking ruled.
it is
Like
top of the
I
Oscars for me, man. I think this should be best picture.
It's also great to see a trial movie that takes place in a country that's different from the States.
I was really struck by that.
Their whole thing, like the prosecutor even has a different costume from
Right.
the defendant's
This little
lawyer.
Just the rules of engagement, they're so different. You can interrupt and say, well, what about this? And
Right.
Well,
really-
and the defendant has to keep answering questions as they come up.
Right.
Like
right.
because they don't
just
have
like turn to her and
they don't
ask
have
her
a
something.
they don't have a Fifth Amendment. They don't you don't have a right not to incriminate yourself or not testify. Like you have to testify.
Yeah, you.
Like
Yeah,
And also, it's
even
like-
though it's Switzerland, I'm sure it's Napoleonic code.
It's actually not. The
until
trial is supposed to take place in Grenoble, France.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So there's also one thing is like it's kind of a nanny state thing where the kid has basically a protector.
I think that's great.
It was
Like-
actually it was neat because it added,
And Marge is my favorite character in the movie.
really.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I the interactions, she's not in it a ton,
Mhm.
but every interaction that she has feels so real to me as someone who's in that position.
Right.
Like the last scene at the end where she's like, "Do you want me to stay?" And it's like, no, you can go. It's fine.
Mhm.
Like there's just a real like sadness to her at that point because she's so obviously become attached to this kid.
I know.
I had the feeling that, and I don't know how it works in France, but that she was a contractor with the city.
She's a
or
government
with the-
contractor.
Yeah, she works for the government.
It's
Yeah.
kind of like
Yeah,
a kind of
she
like
works for the government, so she
kind
had
of
a
equivalent
job.
of a studio teacher. They just get her to kind of watch kids who are
Or
involved.
a social worker. She's
Social
a
worker.
social
Yeah, she's
worker
like a
who
social
lives in
worker.
your
Worker,
house.
except a full-time live-in social
Yeah.
worker,
Yeah.
which is what I think they kind of have in France, which is great.
Right.
That was definitely an interesting moment
Yeah,
when
if you
she
live in a
said,
real
okay, you
country.
can go home. And there was this awkward, like, thank you. No, I'm not going to say thank you.
No.
But
weren't
you could
part
tell
of
that there was
the,
closeness, but then there was this, this social sort of wall between them that they couldn't
Right.
cross. And it was like, okay, bye.
Well, and she knows that she can't sort of interject herself further into it. It's just like, well, that's it. We're done. Like, no matter what emotional feelings I had for this child for the last however long we've been doing this, I just have to go get an Uber and go back to my apartment.
What a
Like,
weekend, though, huh? That she didn't expect when she was pouring the salt water down the dog's throat that it was going to turn out like that.
That scene was nuts.
Holy shit. That dog
That
should get an
dog
Oscar.
is tongue hanging out.
That dog
Like,
is a special
incredible.
Oscar, man.
Sheila Googled that. They said it took a long time to train that dog to act
2
like
months.
that.
2 months, really?
Yeah.
Just to make it pretend like it ate poison vomit.
To put the tongue out is
Also,
probably what they were doing.
they kept talking about he had 10 or 20 aspirins. Was this a bad translation? Because I don't think it'd affect anybody like that.
They sell much higher milligram aspirin.
In other words, they have super powerful aspirin.
Right.
Right.
It's like how you can go to Canada and you can buy 800 milligram ibuprofen over the counter.
Oh,
which is prescription strength here.
Yeah, I get these gel caplets here in Mexico that are like 800 milligrams or something.
I also get that. You can get Mexican Volfanac, that topical cream. It's like it's like they call it
for reference.
My friend calls it hand crack because it's like
for reference. A regular ibuprofen capsule in the United States is 200 milligrams.
Is 200. Yeah, so this is like 3.
It's like popping
so him
4.
popping 10 800 milligram like whatever, it's gonna kill him. Or
and aspirin's a blood thinner,
acidosis.
and then also you have to consider that when it comes to the dog part of it, how much less the dog weighs.
Yeah, right.
Because it's all by weight. It's all milligrams per kilogram.
Right.
Like
it just seemed odd because, like, again, I assumed it was just a weird translation. It's like, you just can't pop a bunch of Bayer's aspirin and you kind of.
I've noticed.
Well, I don't know. Did you see how big the blister packs were?
Yeah, I was like,
the blister
major,
packs were pretty big.
They're popping them out. So either way, it was great because it's actually it's a murder mystery, and there is that extenuating circumstances of the wife. Eventually, you find out is not getting along with him very well, and there was that wonderful that
It was a marriage.
audio only fight. Where you
Yeah,
watch-
how
you're
it
watching
cuts,
them roll out.
how it cuts from the visual flashback
Uh-huh.
to just the audio.
Just
Oh,
the
God,
audio,
that was
yeah.
great.
This movie does such a good job of never tipping its hand about whether she's guilty or not.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
it does such a good
Yep.
job about that.
You know what
Yeah.
it reminded me of? And this is just, it might be trivial, but the movie Presumed Innocent with Harrison Ford.
I haven't seen
Oh, so I might
I
actually
wondered
have to write
if
that one
it
down
was
because,
named after the Jimmy Stewart movie, Anatomy of a Murder, which is an Otto Preminger
or
flick.
In a Lonely Place. It was long talking about writers.
Yeah.
A little bit like
Right.
that too, you know. But this was just, it was really well timed and just
boy, the meat of that fight with
Yeah.
her
Yes.
just telling him, reading
Oh.
him. Jesus
the
Christ.
way, the
And
way
especially
that
since
unfolded-
up to that point, you've sort of been suspecting her or not. Yeah, I mean, it seemed like it really was a game changer when they play that
Yeah.
in the you hear about it early on, right? He's
yeah,
like,
you do.
didn't
It's
know about
alluded
this?"
to early on. Yeah.
It's alluded to that they found this thumb drive with an argument on it.
Well,
Right.
and I said this when we watched Before Sunset, that's
Mhm.
one of the most realistic couples fights I've ever seen in
yeah.
a movie.
Yeah.
This is one of the most realistic couple
Yes,
fights
because
I've ever
say-
seen in a movie.
Yeah.
Ditto. Because it
Like,
starts
yeah.
out like everyone's trying to not hurt each other's feelings and are being guarded, and it's
They're still eating.
Yeah.
yeah.
like
So
they're-
and so the stakes
yeah.
are very small, and they just get bigger and bigger, and then eventually they both lose control of the whole.
And when she stops
Whoa.
eating, it's on.
Uh-huh.
Like as
Yeah.
soon as she stops, as soon as she puts that pasta down,
That's
it's
how
like,
you
no,
know.
we're fucking doing this.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Also, again, it's a stereotype, but don't mess with German girls. They're just gonna, it's like they're gonna win.
It was great to see Sandra Huller do a performance in English, because I mean, obviously she's in she's in
Zone of
Zone of
interest.
Zone.
interest.
She's in Zone this
Zone of Interest,
this year.
yeah.
But did anybody
Amazing.
see
She's
that?
having a year, isn't she?
Did anybody
I
see that
haven't seen
comedy
it
she
yet.
did about 8 years ago?
Oh, there was another movie.
I'm sure I did.
A really good comedy, and it was the character's name, the dad. Shoot. So you can cut this part out where I Google it, Scott.
I'll write that down. Oh, where's my pen?
Knife juggling.
I'll look for the dip in the audio during this.
All I have to do is go to Sandra Huller's
Anyway, she's great, and she was
filmography.
she held up film up really well. And the kid,
She's great.
Oh, the kid is
was
marvelous.
fantastic.
was he wasn't visually impaired in reality, was he?
I don't think so.
Because he's like, I think wearing contacts or something like that.
I
But-
know it took them a really long time to cast him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
I
And,
don't
like,
know.
His parents are from Portugal, but he
Oh,
grew up
really?
in Paris. Yeah.
Mm.
oh wow.
Well,
The comedy with Sandra Huller is called Tony Erdmann. Did anybody see it?
Nope.
No.
I might pick that then.
Yeah.
Okay.
The kid's probably my least favorite character in the movie. But it's mostly because I feel like every time he's on screen, it's sort of plot motivated. Like I don't feel like he really feels that much like his own character, at least until the end.
Yeah.
At the end with the dog, and then the
Then
last
it's
scene.
most definitely
Where
he
he's-
gets a character moment.
Where he
And the
basically
last-
solves the mystery.
and the last scene at the end when he's in bed,
Yeah.
like when she
Mhm.
comes in to talk to him. It's just the smallest, tiniest moment in the movie when she goes to bed and the dog jumps up and lays
Oh,
down
I know.
next to her.
Huh?
It's
Roll
just like,
credits.
well, and it's such a wonderful, like, that's what dogs do. Like, dogs know you feel like shit and you just go and lay down by yourself in bed, and the dog is like, all right, like, this is my job.
Yeah.
Like, this is
Yeah.
what I
I'm
do.
gonna cheer you up. I know I'm a guide dog, but you need the guiding right now. So here
Right.
we go. All right.
Yeah.
I did think the first half of the movie before they got to the courtroom was 100% gripping. I do think that the courtroom scenes probably could have had 10 minutes nipped out.
I feel the other way completely.
It was like the kind of different ways of saying the same thing as they were exploring the relationship. By the time they got to like the in-depth analysis of her book and what was in the book and what scene did she copy from his idea, and I was just like, we already get what the dynamic is here. I don't need to have this
Again,
for me.
This is the thing I was going to bring up based on the last movie, is that I think this is such a good version of what Scott said, like, oh, because this is based on her real life, she doesn't want to, step on any toes.
Right.
Like, this woman wanted to step on all of the toes.
Everybody's toes. Yes.
Yeah. And it's like,
and it's not about her. It can tell it's not about herself.
Right.
Except the fact maybe she's European. That's about it. It's like everything else, or being multilingual. That's the multilingual thing. Again, going back to that again, is like, that is such an interesting thing, because there's always judgments.
And there was such a point in the argument of, well, we're living in your country though. We're speaking English. Because it's either of our native languages.
I'm in your country. I'm
in your
hometown, right?
Yeah. But it's like, the point is, like, I want to express myself. I can't do it in French. I gotta speak in English.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think if the people, the other people in the,
and then she speaks English for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Either they're getting translations, or
she starts out speaking French in the courtroom scenes,
Yes,
but she gets to a point where she can't express herself.
Wasn't that the woman, the court-appointed guardian? They said you must speak French around her at all times. Right. That was interesting. Yeah, it's like
she when she has the conversation with the kid, like after the courtroom stuff,
right?
She's like, "No, please speak French."
Yeah, exactly.
And she's like, "I'm talking to my son. Shut up."
Yeah, pretty much. But it was good.
But that makes sense. Her job is to make sure that the mother isn't influencing his testimony, and so yes, you would have to speak.
Well, I understand.
What a job, man! What a job.
Yes.
I mean, it's like,
there was that scene where they offered the kid the opportunity to not be present at the next day of the trial because they thought it was going to be too much for him.
They're going to talk about this.
I forget what his answer was, but it was already like,
"Oh, I'm going to see it on the internet." He said.
"Yeah, is that what he said?"
Yeah, pretty much. That's what he said. Yeah.
Well, and then you see the scene of them watching the chat show where they're talking about
those weird French shows where they like basically take a newspaper story and discuss it.
Yeah,
there's like four intellectuals.
That
I would say that's their version of court TV. Like court TV did that forever. Yeah. Like it you'd throw back to the studio and there'd be like a former cop, a former defense attorney, a former judge, and they're all going back and forth about what we just watched. Like, it's that same shit. Just, they don't have a camera in the courtroom.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
A couple of times I had to stop the film and just look up French legal procedure, how it worked. Because it's like, it's a whole different thing with the docs on the side, and like, the guys had to stay in the the various benches.
And like the jury was up there with the judge.
I know, it's so weird. So I had to stop and kind of figure out what was going on.
Well, the jurors in that trial are not members of the general public.
No,
the jurors are other judges.
Yeah, it's
other
like
judges
a court martial
or something.
Yeah, it's like a court martial.
Yeah. And also it's like that's addressing what John said about the second half being a little bit long. It's because I think it is a little unfamiliar. Because if it was like My Cousin Vinny, we all know exactly what they're talking about, basically. Yeah, but it's not. It's French law, and it's like a little different.
I had the opposite reaction, because I really felt like early on in the movie, I kind of didn't give a shit. Like I was just like, oh, this is going to be another one of these, and then when it gets to the courtroom stuff, it was like, oh, this is not going to be another one of these. Like, we are going to see a completely different court procedural. They're not going to give us an answer. Like, about halfway through is when I realized we're not going to know.
We'll never know for sure.
We're not going to know if she did it or not.
I mean, we're the jury. We have to make our decision what we think. Is she guilty or not? It's like, you just decide, and that.
I was going to send an email out, a message saying we shouldn't spoil this film because it's still in the theaters, I think. But what
are you going to spoil? That they don't answer the question?
You can't.
Okay. What do you think she pushed him? Was it defenestration, or you?
I think.
We could go around. Yeah, that's good. Let's go around. What do we think?
I think I don't think it really matters whether she did it or not. I don't think the prosecution proved their case. I think there's reasonable doubt whether or not she did it. So if I was on the jury, I would vote not guilty, because I don't think the prosecution proved their case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you see it in the prosecutor's face.
Right,
when
he
after the
realizes-
kid talks,
Mhm.
he's like,
Yep.
this is all just, hearsay, bullshit, whatever. And he still looks defeated at that
Right.
point.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
she was exonerated. I think that
Yeah.
actually that but the kid and the vomit and the dog and like that kind of proved to beyond a reasonable doubt that he really did get high and fall out of a third-story window
Mhm.
all by himself. He had plenty of reason to be depressed. They talked about this whole arc between the kid's accident and his guilt and his failures and his
I suspect
going
people
all the
who
way to
go
the
off
end.
their meds,
And sometimes this is how people's lives end. And that's
yeah.
I felt, and she was just along for the ride and she didn't want to be there at all, but that's how it worked out.
Sure, that's all very possible. Like I
Oh, yeah,
like
yeah.
it very and
We're on the jury right now. I could tell.
Yeah.
right. And I think that
If you were a French judge.
I think the defense did a very good job of pitching that story and making it plausible to the point that I couldn't vote to convict her.
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter if I think she did it or not. The question to a jury is, was this proved
Right.
that
Right.
that
Well,
the
that's the point I'm-
prosecution's theory of the case?
Yeah, that's the different
is-
question. Did they
No,
came
but
to the
that's a-
right verdict?
But that's the point I'm making is that the defense didn't prove that she was innocent. Her goddamn kid did.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
I don't
that-
think
that
I don't
came
think the
about-
kid
that
I don't
came
think the kid
completely out-
proved it.
It was left field. There was
I don't
this
think
whole
the kid I don't think the kid proved it. I think the kid threw enough of a spanner in the works that the you had to say that she was not guilty.
Yeah.
well, A led to B, but okay, I'll agree with you that one.
Again,
Like, I
again, we
don't-
don't
I
get
don't-
a definitive answer. So
I don't feel like
Mhm.
I know for a fact that the director didn't tell her whether she was guilty or not.
okay.
Right.
Like,
Oh, I like that. I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And that is, I mean, again, Sandra Hüller, shit. I mean, it's a hell of a performance because
Mhm.
I don't think that matters because you can't get inside her head. You
Right.
can watch her face. You can look
Right.
at the way she reacts to things that people say to her. And it's exactly what a person who didn't do it would do. But it would also
Yeah.
be what a person who did do it would do if they were a really good actor.
right.
You know,
This guy's really good too.
is that
The
her lawyer?
The
Yeah,
lawyer.
he's
that her
really, really
lawyer?
good.
Really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Do you,
This
do you
scene
think he was being sarcastic when he said they'd never won a case, or do you think he had never won a case?
I think he's being slightly sarcastic. I think
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
saying like the deck is stacked against the defense in this
Yeah.
so we lose most of the time. And
Yeah.
I thought we were gonna lose this case. Like, I think that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
And also, he's kind of
Okay.
a debonair character. He's
Well,
like,
there was the tension if they were gonna fuck her.
I know,
not.
but he's just
Yeah.
had this cool rock star lawyer. They got it.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Basically, it was kind of neat. Also,
Yeah, I was wondering if it was going to go there, Jim, when the fire scene when they're standing outside by the fire.
when they're
This scene-
drinking, sharing that beer.
This
Yeah,
scene.
Like,
Yeah. that scene, yes.
Right.
that's-
Yeah.
Well, and then again, in what was just up behind you at the when they get the last shot at the dinner
Mhm.
after the case is over, like they have that moment. There's that moment of like, if we both pushed a little bit further,
Mm-hmm.
we're together.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good
Eh,
stuff.
And then there's the amazing them in the car going back to the house, and she
Uh-huh.
just starts losing it.
Oh,
Like,
Yeah.
that's when the dam finally breaks. She's
Yep.
like, I get to see him again. I get to be with him again. We get to be a family again. Like,
Yeah.
like it's just, now I can move on.
There it is.
If you want to pick a scene that most to me says she didn't do it, it's that.
Right.
It's that moment of like, I get to go back to my son because that's the only thing that matters.
Mhm. I believe it.
And I get to move from
Right.
France.
Yeah, and I don't have to live in this fucking broken ass chalet in the
Yeah,
middle of
right.
nowhere.
Take the kid, move back to Germany, and be done with it. It's like that's the thing. Jim, you're actually pretty deep in this. I think you need a corner.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I was wondering about it in the beginning because it does have that sort of slow build up where she's really enigmatic. It's interesting that I realized she was German before I figured out that she was, or before she mentions that, because I hadn't noticed the titles when they were saying who was acting in it. But I could tell from her accent how she spoke English. She sounded like a lot of my friends in Germany.
That BBC
And,
English.
yeah, it's that kind of weird. It's the closest thing I can think of is Christoph Waltz when he speaks
Yeah.
English, when he's being
Mhm.
interviewed or when he's not acting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was that. But I mean, at the beginning of that, yeah, it's like this. Your first shock is, of course, finding dad dead on the ground, bleeding out.
I know.
And you go, oh, gee, so this is going to be slightly different. Okay. And then the second one is when they finally make it to the courtroom, because then the whole is she guilty or not thing starts really coming to
Before
a
that
head,
happens,
I
they're
think.
doing the thing where they're doing a dummy off the balcony.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh
They
my
throw
God,
that dummy off.
That was brutal.
That was brutal. Exactly.
I also
I don't know.
like-
I laughed. I literally
Me
laughed.
too, actually.
Yeah,
I did too.
I was
I
just
did
like,
too. I really liked the they had somebody do those really gimmicky the animation.
Oh yeah,
Oh
yeah, yeah.
yes.
That weird Chinese style animation. They do that.
Right, where like the blood splatter, you can see the 3 drops of blood go out of his forehead. And
But that felt like an American procedural, like the 3
Yeah.
splatters of blood and what they mean,
Yeah.
what the angle
Yeah.
was. It was like it was getting to that whole CSI thing. You know?
Although
also blood
was
splatter
really good if
analysis
you've
is
ever been-
bullshit.
I know it is. It is.
Yeah, if you've ever been to a court case like that where they call expert witnesses in, it's always fun to see how the defense or the prosecution, depending on whose witness they are, dismantles that, because they all tend to be kind of quirky, strange characters.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
thought that was
Yeah, they're all
that,
huge
that
nerds.
character of the nerd who comes into, like, what was his
Well, the guy with that big
middle-aged-
mop of hair. What was his deal?
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah,
He's
that guy.
like, he tells this perfect story, and then like her lawyer is
Just
like,
rips him apart.
yeah,
Basically.
well, you don't really know what you're talking about. do you?"
Exactly. That was a
Or,
great-
Yeah, and I mean, he had cast some doubt, and then when they cut to that, well, we did this experiment, and they showed
Yeah.
the ice melting on the roof of the shed, and it's like, why was
Right,
there
right.
blood on the roof of the shed? It was like because it was on top of ice.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, I really enjoyed it. By the time you got to the courtroom and stuff, and then the ending too is quite powerful. I thought that whole going to the weird Chinese restaurant to celebrate after their victory was kind of neat, and that's where I thought maybe she would fall into his arms. But yes, she was a mother first, so she had to go home.
That's
to her
true.
kid and
Right.
Although I
all.
admit a little bit of this. I watched the Zone of Interest a couple weeks ago,
Mhm.
and there's that weird coldness to her character in that I was kind of like,
Yes.
I dragged a bit of that into this, in terms of like her being this cold, kind of calculating, unknowable German woman.
Germans are they seem very standoffish.
Yeah.
And the French it's the same reason that the
It's a
French all
cultural thing
seem
I'm talking
rude.
about. Yeah.
It's a cultural thing, and it's not really that the French are all rude. It's that they're not willing to talk to people about shit until they know one another,
Right.
So
That makes sense.
And
It's
it's
actually
the same with Germans.
Well, it's
it's
like
like, why are you
in
telling me this story?
in
I don't know
France.
you.
In
Mm.
France, it's considered impolite to talk about anything other than the food when you're at dinner.
Right.
Like it's that kind of thing.
Or politics.
Or no, but you're specifically not supposed to talk about politics at dinner. Like that's
Which is why most of them
I am going, man. That's all I can handle anyway. So that sounds good to me.
I will point out the one like wild piece of errata that I noticed about this was that the song was not supposed to be that weird calypso cover of PIMP by 50 Cent. It was supposed to be Jolene. And
by Dolly Parton.
yeah, and the Dolly
Oh,
Parton
they couldn't get
estate,
it.
the Dolly Parton estate wouldn't give them permission
That
to
would have been
use it.
so great.
Right, because you think about it from a fucking from a plot point of view,
Yeah.
from a theme
Yeah.
point of view. She's downstairs with this young woman after having an affair with a young woman recently, and
Uh-huh.
it's like, and the guy's just blasting Jolene from
Oh
upstairs.
my God.
Like that would have been so good.
That would have
like,
that would have really set this thing up.
and I wouldn't have had to hear that Calypso version of PIMP like 6 times.
I read at least 3 or 4 tweets saying I want that erased from my brain forever, because I think it plays over and over in this movie.
That scene where she's getting interviewed and that music is just so unbelievably loud and distorted.
Yeah.
It made me so tense.
Oh, well,
Them
again,
trying to talk over it.
yeah.
Yeah, but imagine it was Jolene.
Yeah. Yeah, it does give it another layer. I'll give you that.
That's great.
Could you get access to the Miley Cyrus version? Jesus Christ!
Yeah,
Like,
right.
play Jolene.
Do a cover. Shit, who
Or
cares?
do
right?
a cover.
Yeah, exactly.
right.
Well, I guess we're at. I guess we're good. We went around the horn about the finale, which is nice. We don't usually do that, which is kind of good. So I guess
Yeah.
we can go thumbs at this point.
Big thumbs up.
Dude,
Big
two
thumbs
of
up.
these, man.
Absolutely thumbs
Very
up.
good film.
This is my pick for best. It actually
Again.
beat out the holdovers for me. It's like
Oh, okay then.
yeah, it's really it's so compelling.